In the vast and varied landscapes of ancient North America, a network of trails crisscrossed the continent, woven together by the footsteps of indigenous peoples for thousands of years. These trails were not mere paths, but they were indeed lifelines, guiding travelers across deserts, mountains, forests, and plains. They connected villages, sacred sites, hunting grounds, and trading hubs, and were instrumental in the survival and thriving of indigenous American cultures long before the arrival of European settlers. Today, these ancient trails have largely faded from the landscape, but their stories remain, stories of movement, survival, and the deep knowledge that the native peoples had of their environment at the time. The concept of trails in Native American cultures was far more than just a means of getting from point A to point B. These paths were often intimately tied to the rhythms of nature, the changing seasons, the movement of animals, and the very geography of the land. Trails were not just functional, they were embedded with meaning, memories, and a connection to the land. Many were passed down through generations and maintained and traveled by those who understood the deep relationship between humans and the earth. The most famous of these trails is one known as the Great Trail, or the Warrior's Path, which spanned from the Great Lakes region all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. This ancient route was a critical passageway for the people of the Iroquois Confederacy and other northeastern tribes, and it became one of the first significant travel corridors for settlers in the 1600s. It served not only as a path of trade and communication, but also as a route for military movements, with warriors using it to travel swiftly between tribal territories. But with the Great Trail is only one example of the intricate network of trails that span the continent. In the Southwest, the Native American trails were often shaped by the unique desert landscapes and the nomadic lifestyle of the tribes who called these regions home. The Navajo, for example, had a series of well-established paths connecting their villages to key resources like water, grazing lands, and sacred sites. One of the most significant routes in this region was the Navajo Trail, which stretched across the high deserts of Arizona, New Mexico, and into parts of Utah and Colorado. The Apache also maintained complex networks of trails throughout the Southwest. These paths were used to move between seasonal hunting grounds and to escape potential threats, particularly during the period of Spanish colonization when the Apache people were fighting to retain their autonomy. Their knowledge of the desert was profound, and their trails often took advantage of natural landmarks like rock formations and riverbeds to remain hidden from outside eyes. Further to the west, the Pueblo people of the Southwest used their own series of trails as well, connecting the mesa dwellings of places like Chaco Canyon and Mesa Verde with trading outposts and ceremonial sites. These paths served as both trade routes and sacred pilgrimage paths, with certain trails believed to lead to places of spiritual power. On the Great Plains, indigenous American tribes like the Lakota, the Cheyenne, and the Blackfeet followed a different set of trails that reflected their nomadic lifestyle as hunters of the mighty bison. These paths were often temporary, and they were carved through the tall grasses by the passage of large bison herds and the people who followed them. For these tribes, the trails weren't just for travel, they were also integral to the seasons of life. The trails led them to the vast hunting grounds, to the bison jumps where herds could be driven over cliffs, and to the sacred sites where rituals were also performed. These trails changed with the seasons as the people moved with their herds. In spring, they would follow the rivers to meet the migrating bison. In winter, they would retreat to sheltered valleys and caves. The trails that they left behind weren't always permanent paths, but were etched into the land and remembered through oral tradition. One of the most famous of these plains trails is the Teepee Trail. It connected the bison hunting grounds of the Cheyenne and the Arapaho to their summer villages along the banks of the Missouri River. This trail, used primarily for hunting expeditions, is remembered for its great importance to the survival of the tribes, as it allowed them to bring back the bison and other resources that sustained their people. Moving north to the Pacific Northwest, the native trails took on a different form. Here, the land was marked by dense forests, rivers, and coastlines. The Coast Salish people, for example, used a system of well-maintained trails along the rivers, estuaries, and through the thick forests of what are now Washington and British Columbia. These trails were crucial for travel between villages, especially for trading fish, furs, and cedar products. The Tlingit and Haida peoples used even more extensive trail system, which connected their coastal villages to the interior lands, which they gathered resources like berries, medicinal plants, and game. These trails were often carved through some of the most rugged terrain in North America, and their creation required incredible ingenuity and knowledge of the land. In the dense forests, the trails were narrow and winding, often hidden beneath the canopy of trees. Along the coasts, trails followed the shorelines and the tidal flats, where the people could harvest shellfish, seaweed, and other coastal foods. These paths were as much of a part of the land as the villages themselves, and they facilitated an intricate system of trade and cultural exchange. The Southeast had its own network of trails that connected the Cherokee, the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, and the Creek people. In a region rich with rivers, swamps, and forests, these trails often followed waterways, allowing for easier travel by canoe. The Trail of Tears, the tragic route taken by the Cherokee during their forced relocation to Indian Territory in the 1830s, is one of the most infamous examples of these old routes. But before this tragedy, the very same paths were used for trade, seasonal migrations, and ceremonial gatherings. The Mississippian culture, a mound-building culture known for its large earthen mounds and complex societies, also relied on well-established trade routes that spanned across what is now the Midwest and southeastern United States. These trails connected the mound-building centers like Cahokia and Moundville with distant trading partners, allowing for the exchange of goods like copper, obsidian, and seashells from the Gulf of Mexico. The ancient trails of North America were much more than just transportation routes. They were a means of survival, a way to maintain vital cultural practices, and a system of communication that tied together a continent of diverse peoples. As time passed and European settlers began to spread across the land, many of these trails were altered or lost altogether. Yet the memory of these ancient paths lives on in the stories of Indigenous American communities, in the names of the places that they traversed, and in the geography that still reflects their ancient footprints. In the modern era, these trails have often been forgotten or replaced by highways and cities. But for Native people, the trails are not just history. They are a testament to their deep knowledge of the land, their resilience, and the enduring connection to the earth. As we walk the land today, it's important to remember that beneath the pavement, beneath the concrete, lies these ancient trails, the ones that carried ancestors, brought communities together, and connected them to the earth in a way that we can only begin to understand. Thank you for journeying with me along these ancient trails, where the past still whispers through the winds that rustle the trees, the rivers that flow through the valleys, and the mountains that watch over us. For now, this has been Doogie from Doogie's Earthworks, and I'm out of here. I love you.